Hi, Harold.
Hi, there you go. Thank you for joining us, Mike. Our program tonight's going to be a really interesting one. I just finished your book last night because I was savoring, one or two pages a day for the last several weeks, and it's been a very delightful little voyage. So I wanted to introduce everyone. This program is being sponsored by the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center. Our building is closed down for the summer, so we decided to try some virtual programs instead. My name is Harold Wood, and I'm a volunteer with the center. Our guest tonight is Professor Michael Wurtz from the University of the Pacific. He's an assistant professor at the university, and he's the head of the special collections at the university's Holt-Atherton Library, which is the holder of the John Muir Papers. So he's quite an expert about John Muir's writings and all of the documents that are found in his papers. So we will go ahead and start with Mike Wurtz.
All right.
One other thing, if there's questions as we're going, there is a Q&A that you'll be able to type into, and then we'll look at those. We're probably holding questions to the end, but I see already that there's some comments anyway. I don't see actual questions. I just see hi from folks. So I think we're doing okay. One person says we've not yet started. Hopefully everyone can hear this now. My test over here says it's working okay. So go ahead, Mike. I'll go ahead and let you go.
All right. Thank you so much, Harold. And thank you all for showing up tonight. It's a little easier than making the drive to the valley. And then, of course, I'm sure many of you are missing the YCHC. I had the opportunity yesterday to actually go up to Yosemite, and I stopped by and looked longingly at the building for just a moment as I made my way into some brief hikes. But it was mostly a driving tour, which was really interesting because you can drive in the valley right now. It's amazing. We actually drove. I mean, I know that there's a lot of things wrong with that, but we could easily drive from point to point rather than dealing with trying to find parking at each of the places that we went to. So it's a real privilege to be here. And I'm going to share my screen now. Do we have the right screen up there, Harold?
Yes, that looks good.
Excellent. Before I get started, I wanted to kind of say a couple of things about the recent issues that have cropped up with the Sierra Club and John Muir. The main thing is that's not what I'm addressing tonight. There is some talk about creating a program based on that. But really what I wanted to talk about, just kind of a little introductory comments before we get started, is that I am an archivist, and my main responsibility is to share the writings of John Muir and to share the writings that we have in our collections. We have the largest collection of material of John Muir anywhere in the world. And that is my first responsibility, is to share that. And my other responsibility is only to judge the authenticity of the sources that we have in the collection. And then in addition to that, I also wanted to say that, traditionally we do honor John Muir, and we recognize him for his remarkable observations and his desire to preserve the environment. However, we can look at this as an opportunity to learn from Muir's assumptions, and then also make unbiased observations and express them in appropriate and non-hurtful ways. All right, so let's get started. Couple of things I want you to keep in mind as we go along today. The first is I'm going to show you a bunch of cool Muir drawings, and as Harold mentioned, I've written a book, and that more or less is what the cover looks like right there. And what you get in that is a lot of drawings. Another thing I want to talk about is having purpose while you're in the outdoors. I mean, everybody has their different reasons for being in the outdoors. One of my favorite parts about being in the outdoors is when I actually have a project to do. I know that sounds weird, but for me, I really enjoy that. And this was a wonderful opportunity to scout these sites that John Muir visited to do that. Another thing I really want you to kind of remember, and I think I'm preaching to the crowd here, but remember to take a moment, when you're out in the outdoors. And I have a quote that John Muir said that would be very helpful in that context. We'll come to that. And then lastly is thanking John Muir for making these places available to me. I mean, by going to these places and seeing some of these amazing views, it was just such an opportunity. And there were so many times when I was just like sit there and look at what he saw 100 and however many years ago, and just kind of feel that and just really thank him for giving me the opportunity to go there. So what can you expect from tonight? You can expect a lot of pretty pictures of Yosemite that are drawings of Yosemite that John Muir made. You'll also get a few musings of John Muir. You probably have most of them memorized if you want to sing along at those parts. So we can have our sing along part of the campfire if you want. And then as Harold mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity for Q&A. We can either answer some of those live as I see them, or if they're more appropriate for a more general discussion, I'll come to that a little bit later. Like you, I really like to, there we go. I like to go where John Muir has stood. And this is true not just for John Muir. I like to go where a famous movie scene has been made. You know, I like to stand on the corner where, you know, or go to, what is that deli in New York where, and Harry Met Sally or whatever. It's fun to revisit these places. And of course you can do that with John Muir as well. And I don't, you know, I really, it's, you know, sometimes you get that chill going up your spine kind of aspect to it. And it's kind of fun. And for me, that's really unusual because one time John Muir had written about Asa Gray, the famous botanist. He had said that Asa Gray's, the angular factiness of his pursuits have kept him too cold a distant from the spirit world. I'm an angular factiness kind of guy. I really am cold and distant from the spiritual world. But you know, when I go and do like, and this is actually a photograph that I took yesterday, where I go and stand exactly where John Muir stood, it can be kind of powerful. And so we're going to see some of that today. Let's see. Okay, so as you may or may not know, the University of Pacific is the home to the largest collection of John Muir materials in the world, including hundreds of drawings. Now, the drawings can be, obviously they're all amazing, but some of them are technical, some of them are detailed, some of them are just plain sketches, you name it. And they appear as just drawings. We have a whole series of drawings, there are about 300 of those. But his journals and notebooks are littered with more drawings that you may not be familiar with. And we're going to cover a couple of those today here too. He even has drawings in his letters, and he uses drawings in some of his draft articles. And of course, in his books, some of those drawings made it into his books. And so here at the University of Pacific, we have, again, the responsibility to share. And what we want to do is share that. We have put all this stuff online. Well, there actually is a few things that we haven't put online yet, or getting there. But the main thing is to get this material online. And we put all the drawings and the journals and notebooks online so you can see for them, you can look at them yourself. There has always been talk of creating a really nice book of Muir's drawings. I hope this is the beginning of that, and maybe we can do more of that as we move on. But it really was that the internet that really made this possible for us. Okay. So what do you get in my book? Well, this is kind of a standard entry. You do get a John Muir drawing, and then you get what the area is. You actually get the location, even directions on how to get to that exact point that John Muir sat to make that drawing. And then I have a Muir passage in there, and then a little bit of commentary that I curated myself that talks a little bit about either the park's culture or John Muir history, or even a little bit of geology. All these things are in there. And we've identified, or I have identified 25 sites. This was whittled down again and again. Actually, I started off with, I think, 140 drawings that I identified that I wanted to find. I think I found about 50 of those. And then the Yosemite Conservancy and I whittled them down until we got to this 25, which are identified here on the map. And there's the cover of the book again. And so you can actually do it by the map if you're a map person like I am. Disclaimers. You probably realize this already. This is not John Muir's Yosemite anymore. It is not the same place that John Muir tromped around 100 and something years ago. And so some of the sites that I do visit, I have given you places that are most specifically not as dangerous to go to. John Muir went to some pretty dangerous places to make some of the drawings. And so the park and the Yosemite Conservancy felt that it was very important that we do not lead people to those exact places. you can see the problem with you know, it not being John Muir's Yosemite. There I am doing about the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life, and that is standing at the top of Liberty Cap, taking a selfie of myself looking down at Nevada Fall. I still don't know how I lived through that moment. That shouldn't have happened. So don't do this at home. And thank God we're all at home right now to watch this presentation, so you won't just run out and go do this tomorrow as if we were at the Heritage Center. But yeah, this is something you don't want to do. The other thing is you may recognize that gentleman standing in the field, and that's Huell Hauser. He's doing something else that the park really frowns upon, and that is Yosemite has some very strong walls, but it has a very, you know, those meadows and things like that are not as strong ecologically. And so we've moved some of the sites, the directions to some of the sites, so people do not have to tramp on ecologically fragile systems or stand in very, very dangerous places. And of course, to paraphrase the famous quote by John Muir, yes, heed the mountains that are calling and that you should go, but work on while you can, protecting yourself and study your surroundings incessantly. Okay, so how did I get into this? My folks have had a cabin up by the Calaveras Big Trees for about 50 years now. And when I was a young man, I'd go into the forest quite a bit. But when I came to UOP in 2004, I was looking through the collection and I noticed that there was a picture of John Muir in the Calaveras Grove. And I said, wow, I really want to figure out where that was. Fortunately for me, if you look really carefully, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but this tree here is a little different than the other trees around it. It doesn't have any bark. I've zoomed in on it. You can kind of see it here. It has no bark. And for those of you that are familiar with Calaveras Big Trees, you know really quickly which tree was stripped of its bark. The mother of the forest was stripped of its bark. And then Muir visited, and this is 1900. In 1908, this tree burned and is now the mother of the forest, which is just a big black snag. Again, just last week, I went right back down to that exact spot that John Muir stood, right by this big burl, and retook the picture. You notice that I'm wearing my mask there, but I am trying to stand just like John Muir did. So this kind of goes back. This is probably 2006, 7, 8, in that era when I first started recognizing that I wanted to not only visit famous movie sites, but I also wanted to visit where John Muir had visited. My first drawing site was right there in the Tuolumne Grove, and this is the old dead giant, as Muir put it. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with this particular tree. You can see that John Muir's drawing looks a lot different from the tree, but when you hear this description that Muir wrote, it's clear that this is the same tree. I found a black charred stump about 30 feet in diameter or 80 or 90 feet high, a venerable, impressive old monument of a tree that in its prime may have been the monarch of the grove. Seedlings and saplings growing up here and there, thrifty and hopeful, giving no hint of the dying out of the species. So he's talking about this tree, and as you can see, he's written on there, old dead giant, Tuolumne Grove, 1869. So this is during his first summer in the Sierra that he writes this, or that he made this drawing. As you can see, there's a hole in the tree now. That was burrowed through there in 1878. Traffic on this road was closed in 1962, and then you could still drive down to this snag, but in the 1990s, they even closed traffic down to this part of the grove. This is a photograph. There are no photographs in the book. It's nothing but drawings. This was actually kind of an inspiration from Robert Hanna, one of John Muir's great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. He had sat on this very rock that his great-great-great-grandfather had sat on. And I said, well, I'm going to figure out where that rock is too. And it's pretty easy. You've got a very easy marker there. And that's really what the thing is with these drawings and photographs, is to find markers that'll help us identify them. Muir wrote, watch its waters calmly bending over the brow of the precipice in a sheet 80 feet wide, changing in color from green to purplish gray and white until dashed on the boulder talus. Thence issuing from beneath its fine broad spray cloud, we see the tremendously adventurous river, still unspent, beating its way down the wildest and deepest of all its canyons in a gray, roaring rapid. Okay, we're having a little bit of lag time here. I apologize. I'll try to go a little bit slower so you'll see the images as they come up. So I'll kind of go forward, but I'll try to move my images a little bit before I want to start talking about them. That particular image there at the bottom of Vernal Fall is, it's rather remarkable, and you can see that I didn't quite match up the aspect ratio. And that's another difficulty with photographs, is that trying to get everything just right can be a real challenge. Whereas with the drawings, you have a little bit more latitude. Okay, we've got these two beautiful drawings here, and this is kind of fun. These two actually came to me a little bit late. I didn't recognize them at first, even though one of them says in Yosemite looking down Merced Canyon. I didn't quite do all the mechanics in my brain to figure out that one. And then of course the one on the right you'll recognize, but this one, as you can see, is looking out at Glacier Point is on the left there, and Grizzly Peak is on the right. And this particular site, I believe, I feel very comfortable that I'm pretty close to the site. I don't think I'm at the exact site that Muir sat to make this drawing, but I think I'm very close. And for those of you that are familiar with the trail, the Above the Mist Trail on the between Vernal and Nevada Fall, there is that bridge about halfway between the two falls. And it is right near that bridge. There's actually a nice little space kind of where I'm standing there holding that, holding up the drawing. There's a space there that I think really comes pretty close, and you can see from Muir's drawing in the center and my photograph in the center that it's quite possible that those trees might be the same trees. I mean, it'd be exciting if they were, but we really don't know. It can be kind of difficult to get that one. But what's really cool about this particular site is if you swing around and look upward, and I apologize for the lag here, but if you swing around and make yourself a 180, you are looking at Liberty Cap with Nevada Fall. And as you can see in my photograph, Nevada Fall is somewhat obscured by a tree. This was a constant challenge throughout this project, as there was always trees that were there that hadn't been there in John Muir's time. As many of you probably know, at the base of Nevada Fall, Albert and Emily Snow built the Alpine House, which was later called La Casa Nevada. And Muir actually visited Casa Nevada in 1873, and he has a very long entry in their journal there, in the guest register, and he ended with, "We reached Snows weary with delight, and the Nevada sang us to sleep." The Snows stopped running that hotel around 1889, and then the building burned to the ground around 1900. This was actually kind of a fun trip. There I am with my friend Bobby Wen. He's the one, this is on the top of, this is from the top of Liberty Dome, either moments before or moments after I took that really unwise decision to take that selfie. Fortunately, I lived through that. But anyway, so I did visit the base, kind of where the hotel used to be. And it is kind of interesting. If you poke around down there, you'll see some remnants of what would give you some pretty clear indication that there had to have been a building there at some point in the past. And my friend Alice Van Omeren, who's written quite a few books, including some books about postcard history in the Valley, have also found it, has also found some pretty interesting, she was the one that first led me there, and that was really cool. Okay, hopefully you can see this image that I'm seeing. You're probably looking at this image saying, come on, I know exactly where this one is. This is the easiest one in your whole program. And it is a very powerful image. But when I first looked at it, first of all, I think I'm gonna read a quote of John Muir's to kind of get us in the mood for this. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about, thinking about contemplating place when you go up to Yosemite. This is one of my favorite Muir quotes. "Once arrived in the valley, it's important to know what to do with one's self. I would advise sitting from morning till night under some willow bush on the riverbank where there is a wide view. This will be doing the valley far more effectively than riding along trails in constant motion from point to point." So this is Muir telling you, hey, slow down when you're in the valley. Again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. I think you all are probably quite clear about taking your time and sitting by the river. And those are some of the clues that I got when I looked at this image. I said, oh, okay, this is easy. We got Half Dome, we got Washington Column, we've got Royal Arches, we've even got a little bit of North Dome up there. And look, right there in the middle is the Merced River. This is gonna be super easy. I can just do this one. So off I went trying to find this, and I've already moved on. Excuse me,
Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, I just wanted to mention we're getting some feedback that some people are saying that the screen is still lagging behind what you're talking about. So
yeah,
because of the Zoom thing, it just I guess have to allow more time than you normally would in a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
So kind of hard getting this, but thank you to those who have given us that input, so we can kind of try to slow things down and keep it on schedule. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So, and it's good that some people are not having a lag. For those of you that are not having the lag, or actually even those that have the lag, should be seeing what I'm seeing. So basically, I tromped out into the forest. This is not too far from the Ahwahnee. I said, well, here's the river, and here's Half Dome, kind of obscured by trees, but a lot of time has gone by, so maybe trees have grown in its place. And there's Washington Column. This has got to be it. And you're probably seeing the same thing I am, and you're saying, no, that can't be it. And so I stared at this for a while and I said, well, this can't be it. So what I did is I went back to work where we have VR technology, Google Earth with VR, which if none of you have had the opportunity to do this, this is amazing technology and it's a lot of fun. And you can go all over the world and travel in the world in 3D and see some pretty amazing things in 3Ds. You can walk down streets in Barcelona. You can do whatever you want. It's remarkable technology. And I said, I could really use this while I create this book. And as you can see here, what I did is in the upper left, I know that there's that little notch where, I keep wanting to say South Dome, where Half Dome meets, well, I'll do it over here, where Half Dome meets Washington Column. You can see that those are two points that are really far apart. So what I did is virtually, I flew into the air up to this point and I lined that up, and then I backed up and backed up until I crashed into the ground virtually. And then what I would do is once I crashed into the ground, I'd skyrocket and look down where I was. And that's when you're saying, oh, come on, Mike, you knew this one long ago. You should know this. This one's real obvious. Yeah, it's right there in Cook's Meadow. I believe the exact spot is probably a little deeper into the meadow where I'm standing, but it is right there in Cook's Meadow. And that was not the Merced River that I could see. That was actually Cook's Meadow. It was a meadow there in the foreground. This was actually a really fun part of my project too, is when I went out there and I'd have all my stuff sprawled out. In fact, you can kind of see my bicycle next to the woman there, but I'd have my notebook with me, which she's holding. I'd have my bicycle out and I'd be kind of all, trying to move around, trying to figure out where things are. And people would come up to me and talk to me. And I just loved that. I love to be able to talk to people, not only about Muir, but the park and the project that I was working on, because it was a lot of fun. And then of course, once I got to the spot, I would grab its longitude and latitude and that sort of thing, so I could put that into my notes for the book. Sheepishly, as many of you are like, hello, I totally know what this is about. I know where this spot is. Yeah, I knew where it was too. In fact, that lower picture in the snow, I had visited this about 3 years ago before I was even working on this project. I already had it in my phone. You could probably look in your phone right now and find out that you took this exact same picture. In fact, when I gave this talk recently, one of the attendees actually sent me their picture that they'd taken, and the picture above is a picture that my brother-in-law had also taken. So it's really, you'll find this image everywhere. It is pretty iconic. And it was fun to kind of look at that closely and realize if you look really carefully at it, yeah, that's a meadow and not the river. This is a beautiful drawing that Muir made, and he writes, April 15th, 1870, bright, balmy full moon is looking over shoulder of South Dome, had three pine trees and a rock upon its disk, outlined with startling distinctiveness. No other tree, however faint, at all visible, looked like a metal. The trees seemed fairly melted into the white sliver of the moon. And so this is a really beautiful drawing of John Muir's. And you're going to kind of see a theme in these next few drawings, that they're all from more or less the same location. And you can probably figure that out real easily why they're all from the same location. It's because that's kind of where Muir lived for the first few years that he was in Yosemite, was right there near Cook's Meadow. But we're going to come back to that in a minute. This particular drawing that I just showed you, what you're looking at now, you should be looking at the journal that John Muir kept. This is his journal from 1870. And you can see that he actually made a little sketch to remind himself of the drawing that he was going to make later. And that's the actual entry in the actual journal. And just to remind you, all of these journals are online. You can go look at them anytime you want. There's no passwords or anything like that. You can just jump right in there. Many of these journals have been transcribed, so you can even keyword search. So for example, if you wanted to see where Muir was talking about the moon, you could keyword search for the moon and find this drawing, along with a million other places where Muir talks about the moon. Not everything has been transcribed, so this is actually also a call. If you're interested, you could go in yourself and you could help us transcribe some of Muir's writings, which is really a fascinating job. It can be kind of hard. I'd imagine there's probably a couple of transcribers out there who have joined us this evening on this project to see these drawings. So as I mentioned earlier, John Muir's home was right near there at the edge of Cook's Meadow, more or less. And so a lot of drawings are made from that area. So what I did is I went out there. I couldn't be there on a full moon night. I'd like to do that again, but I did go online and I found an astronomical program. I found a program that recorded astronomy, and I could actually go back to April 12th of 1870 and figure out exactly where the moon rose, at what angle it rose. And it turns out that it kind of rose right there where I have that line pointing. I'm pretty sure this is it. I was with my friend Bob Hare at the time. He'll come up again a little bit later. And we're still not sure, but this, where I've got the arrow pointed, there was a little lip there that worked pretty well. And then there was also another lip along there too that worked pretty well. But I'm pretty sure that this is the one that we saw. And this was actually, this is last summer when I had the opportunity to volunteer for the YCHC. So that was a big thank you to the Sierra Club for giving me the opportunity to get into the valley for an entire week. Sticking with that theme, these two drawings, I've obscured the one of them, and you're going to figure out real quickly where it is, but I'll just go ahead and tell you. We've got, well, actually, no, I'm going to do this the slow way. Let's talk about the drawing on the left first, and I'm going to zoom in. This one's really cool. If you zoom in, you'll see that there's a little fence right there. And of course, you'll also see some big logs, and you get to scratching your head a little bit. You're wondering, are these the logs that John Muir milled when he worked for Hutchins in those early days? Could be, but that is certainly a field there that has been fenced off to keep livestock or whatever. So yeah, we're at Cook's Meadow again. And here are the drawings in situ, where more or less where I'm standing, and you can see that I'm really close to bus stop. I can't remember the number of that bus stop, but anyway, the bus stop that's right there that empties out where the lower Yosemite Fall trail comes out right there, and you'll see that these two sites are right there. We're looking at Glacier Point, and also we're looking down at Sentinel Dome, or Sentinel Rock rather. Now those dates are circa dates. The more I look at that 1875, the less comfortable I feel with it. But Muir sometimes would label his drawings, but he never really gave us a whole lot of information like dates, direction that he was looking, things like that. But that's not unusual. But that is something that we do teach the students here at UOP, is that when you do make a drawing, make sure you include everything that you can. Where were you? What is it of? What's the date? Whatever, even if the weather conditions. But this is kind of cool because you really get a good feeling of what Muir thought of Sentinel Rock. And Sentinel Rock, of course, plays a really big role in Muir's account of the 1872 earthquake that he felt. And he wrote, "The shocks were so violent and varied and succeeded one another so closely that I had to balance myself carefully in walking as if on the deck of a ship. I feared that the sheer-fronted Sentinel Rock towering above my cabin would be shaken down, so I took shelter back of a large yellow pine," really good idea, "hoping that it might protect me from at least the smaller outbounding boulders." He also adds, this is my favorite line from this, he says, It was as if nature were wrecking her Yosemite temple, getting ready to build a still better one. Okay, well, like I said, John Muir lived right there at the base of Yosemite Fall and of Lower Yosemite Fall. And he wrote this about this particular place that he's living in. From the Yosemite Creek, near where it first gathered its beaten waters at the foot of the fall, I dug a small ditch and brought a stream of water into the cabin, entering at one end and out the other, with just current enough to allow it to sing and warble in low, sweet tones, delightful at night while I lay in bed. In the spring, the ferns pushed through between the joints of the slab. Dainty little climbing tree frogs occasionally climbed the ferns and made fine music into the night. This one's, as you can see, we've got some real easy markers. There's Lower Yosemite Fall, you've got some cliff, and you've got what appears to be a meadow in the foreground. And of course, Muir thankfully labeled this one and gave us a date. Thank you, John Muir, for that. And you're probably thinking, oh yeah, that one's easy. I've seen the plaque for that one. And there is the plaque there at the base of Yosemite Fall. In fact, if you look really carefully at that plaque, you'll notice that the drawing that they used to make this plaque is John Muir's actual drawing, which I think was, really, that was kind of exciting when I found that one out. And the backstory on this is, if you read the plaque carefully, it talks about the California Conference of Social Workers. And I found the California Conference of Social Workers records online. And sure enough, they had visited the valley for their annual meeting, I think in 1921, 22, 23, something like that. And they declared, I think William Frederick Baudet was a speaker that year, and they declared that they must put up this plaque to John Muir's home, and that William Frederick Baudet will tell us where that plaque should go. And so it got me on the wild goose chase. And if you've looked at that drawing a number of times and you look at where the plaque is, it doesn't quite jive. It's just something doesn't quite match. And so I've heard a lot of different stories about where John Muir's original cabin was. And then I even heard some stories that they had the plaque in another part of the lower part of Yosemite Falls. A lot of different stories had come through. And this is kind of interesting here. There's William Frederick Baudet on the left, next to Wanda Muir, John Muir's daughter, and then Superintendent Washington Lewis. And if you look really carefully, you'll notice that the plaque is actually just resting on a rock. That is not its final rock. This photograph was taken at the dedication in 1924. Well, this photograph here I found through the Yosemite National Park's archives. I also found this picture of Rose Beale, and this particular photograph of Rose Beale is dated 1926. So there she is sitting on the rock, on that exact rock in its exact place in 1926. It made me pretty sure that they had not moved the rock since they'd placed it there in 1924, 25, 26. And because I enjoy these fun things, I had my colleague, Veronica Wells, sit atop that exact same rock, the exact same way that Rose Beale is sitting on that plaque in 1926. And she did that last year when we visited. Interestingly enough, I've been in contact with William Frederick Baudet's grandson, Alan Baudet, and he's done a lot of research, and he's got some letters that he's hoping to donate to us someday. But it was pretty interesting because one of the letters specifically talked about William Frederick Baudet. And I think it was written, I don't have the exact date off the top of my head, but it was written after the plaque had been placed. And he says, I don't think I placed the plaque exactly where it was supposed to be placed. So it leads a lot into a lot of speculation of where his house originally was. Frank Helling helped me look around, and he had some pretty good ideas of where it is. And most likely it's actually probably along the trail, kind of as you leave those last sites that we're at, where the trailhead to the east end of the Lower Yosemite Fall Trail. It's along there someplace. Frank is quite resolute as to where it is. Along there, you can see where there's a lot of been cuts in the water or in the dirt where maybe Muir had cut his little area. I believe that it's probably a little closer to the meadow that was there, because it is a drawing of a meadow, and it looks like the house is on the meadow. Now, granted, A lot of trees have probably come into the way in the meantime, so we don't really know for sure. But I actually tromped around there just yesterday, way up against the trees there to try to figure out if there was any clues or anything that could help me understand where Muir's cabin was. And if you go through there and if you go through the meadow and then pop out and come up along the trail to Lower Yosemite Falls, they're very close. They come very close to each other, and it quite likely is up in that corner there. So this was kind of a fun one. I really enjoyed this one. Will we ever know? It'll probably take an archaeological study to figure out where that house was at one time. Obviously, all the trees have changed. They were a lot shorter. Some of them weren't even there. Even that one that looks kind of snaggy appears to be long gone. So who knows what's going on there. Okay, moving right along. This one's easy to spot, in fact, because there's a really nice plaque there on the Lower Yosemite Fall trail. And this is the original drawing from the original letter that was actually donated from the Badets. This is the original letter, including this, and I'm going to read a little bit here about what John Muir had to say about the house. Yep, Elaine, you got it. Oh no, the cabin is not the same as the hang nest. Someone asked that just now, and I'll answer it live. And this is what Muir wrote. I have a small box-like home fastened beneath the gable of the mill, looking westward down the valley. People call it the hang nest because it seems so unsupported. Fortunately, only people that I dislike are afraid to enter it. And it's a beautiful little hang nest. You can see that he's got all sorts of windows in it, that he could look at the falls, he could look at Half Dome, he could look down the valley, everything. So this is the hang nest that John Muir lived in during that time. And as I said, there's a plaque there today. Okay, interesting story, a little bit of backstory. And I know this has been in the news quite a bit lately. This is the notebook, not a journal. This is a notebook for John Muir's My First Summer in the Sierra. This was written in the late 1880s. We guess around 1887. And this is a notebook and not the original journal. The original journal of John Muir's My First Summer in the Sierra, we don't know where it is. We don't know if it exists. Muir may have cut it apart in order to write this notebook. He may have cut it apart in order to publish the book in 1911. A number of things that can go on there, but this is the original notebook, and this is online. This one has not yet been transcribed, but this is online. And you see that beautiful drawing that Muir has made standing at the top of the falls. And you probably know this story quite well. Basically what Muir wanted to do is he wanted to know what it was like to be water, to go over a waterfall like this. He wanted to get the best view that he could. So he crept out as close as he possibly could to the precipice to look over this waterfall. And so he made this drawing. And if you look really carefully, oh, move on to the next one here. And sorry about the lag. I'm trying to keep up, or I'm trying to get ahead of myself, but it's hard. But if you look very carefully, you'll see that he makes a little line showing A and B, but how he got out to this point here. And for those of you that are very familiar with the Upper Fall and have been here many times, it doesn't look like John Muir drew it. And I think the main thing to keep in mind here is that when John Muir drew it, it was 20 years after. And there's something else going on here. Not only 20 years later, he's drawing it from space. John Muir made not a lot of drawings from space, but this is definitely one of them where he didn't get his drone out and got out into space and then made this drawing. This is clearly, he's drawing it from his mind's eye 20 years after the fact. So maybe he didn't get that cliff exactly right. But I am going to read a little passage here for you. While perched on that narrow niche, I was not distinctly conscious of danger. The tremendous grandeur of the fall in form and sound and motion, acting at close range, smothered the sense of fear. How I long remained down there, I don't know, and how I returned, I can hardly tell. Anyhow, I had a glorious time and got back to camp about dark, enjoying triumph exhilaration soon followed by dull weariness. Hereafter, I'll try to keep from such extravagant, nerve-straining places. And of course, you're familiar with the story. There's so much more that goes on in there. My favorite part of it is what he writes the next day, because he dreamt repeatedly through the night, he dreamt of falling into the valley. And he said, one time springing to my feet, I said, "This time is real, all must die, and where could a mountaineer find a more glorious death?" Okay, I apologize again that I just moved the slide forward to talk about the next slide, but this is, as you can see, Upper Yosemite Fall. Again, Bob Hare, who has done some amazing research on some of John Muir's drawings and figuring out where he originally made his drawings from. He actually went the easy way, which all of us can do today. You just go to that little viewing platform, basically, that's there on the west side of Yosemite Creek at the top of the fall. And he looked over and took a picture, and that black line that he's drawn in there is what he believes is the route that Muir took to get that same view of looking over the precipice into the valley. And you can see it's a very scary route. Gosh, someday I hope I can rappel down there and stand there and see what Muir saw. But I even have a little trouble standing over here on this side of the thing and looking out there. But my favorite line about this is Bob Hare, when we were having an email exchange about where Muir had made this drawing from. Bob Hare says, yeah, he kind of chose the worst perspective to make this drawing of Yosemite Falls and him at the top of Yosemite Falls. This beautiful drawing here says from Yosemite Valley from top of South Wall. And so my mind immediately thought, oh yeah, I've gone up 4 Mile Trail, near the top of 4 Mile Trail. This is probably drawn from up there someplace. This is going to be real easy. I actually hopped in Google Earth with VR and went over to Glacier Point and looked down valley. And it's like, things are just not matching up. And you're probably thinking the same thing I am. It's like, Mike, come on, that's real obvious. That's El Capitan right there. This has got to be Taft Point. Well, guess what? You're right. This is Taft Point right here, and there's El Cap right there. This one's really easy to spot. This one is definitely off trail, and we found an easier place that you can go where it's not quite so treacherous. But what I really loved about this is there's quite a few things happen this day. I was there with my brother, and I was also there with Alice Van Omeren, who I had mentioned earlier, who had done some postcard research. And we spent a glorious afternoon just kind of wallowing at the top of Taft Point there. But this is really fascinating. You can kind of see where I came really close to getting this one right. But check this out. I love this. If you look closely at Muir's drawing on the left here, there is a tree. It kind of disappears when it gets into the valley there, but there's a tree. But if you look over here, there is a stump. I am pretty sure that that tree is now that stump. We've got this other kind of bushy thing that's long gone, but this, I'm pretty sure that stump is that tree. And so I feel very confident about this particular sighting that we had. As I mentioned, I was there with my friend Alice Van Omeren and her partner Casey, and my brother Ron, and that's me. And you're probably looking at these photographs and saying, "What the heck are you doing?" Well, I'm trying to coin a term. I probably shouldn't, because it's just so annoying when people coin terms like this, but I'm calling it mirroring, and that is doing what Muir does. And I'm going to talk about this. When I spend a week in the valley, when I'm up there volunteering for the Sierra Club or whatever, when I'm up there for a week, I sometimes find that going to and from camp, I might get through an entire day without looking at Half Dome, which is really weird because from camp you can see Half Dome. But it's like you kind of get comfortably familiar with Yosemite, and there are probably things that you don't see. And Muir also recognized that you can become comfortably familiar with your surroundings. And he especially recognized this on his 4th trip to Alaska in 1890. And he wrote, when you have this problem with this comfortable familiarity, he wrote, "All that is necessary to make any landscape visible, and therefore more impressive, is to regard it from a new point of view, or from an old one, with our head upside down. Then we behold a new heaven and earth, and are born again as if we've gone on a pilgrimage to some far off holy land." So I recommend that you give this a try. It is really remarkable. When you look at the landscape upside down, it really is different, and it's really kind of mind-blowing sometimes. And as you can see here, I have taken friends to do this. Here's us on the way to North Dome. Probably some of you recognize this right away. This is Crater Lake. This is a group of geology students that we take up to Crater Lake every year to do a geology trip. And there I make them all lay down on their back and draw Crater Lake upside down. And then this is a place called Rainbow Basin in Southern California. You can see there's a little rainbow there. And if you put your head upside down, that rainbow goes the other direction in the shape of a rainbow. And this is another group of students that I took to Grand Canyon in 2015. We've taken this trip with geology students as well. So if you ever see somebody laying down upside down, you can accuse me, especially if they call it mirroring. I feel bad about using that term, but I really enjoy doing it. As I mentioned, a lot of John Muir's drawings are sketches, and some of them have some very distinct purposes that they serve, and they are schematics of what Muir is trying to explain. And you can probably figure this out this one out pretty quickly. John Muir is talking about the glacial origins of Yosemite Valley, and he's talking about ways things moved, and he's actually writing it down what this all means. And this is transcribed on our website. So if you want to read what John Muir wrote about this, it actually showed up a little bit later. Oh, and here I am visiting the site. This was last year, and you can see how beautiful this area is here. And I got to back off for a minute. Whoops. Oh, that's not there. Okay. Anyway, this is the drawing again. This is what the drawing finally looked like when it appeared in Overland Monthly. I think in 1872. Unfortunately, I don't have the date right in front of me, but he included this. This is what the drawing looked like when it was actually in the article that he wrote about Yosemite's glaciers. I thought, there we go. This is looking up this canyon, looking up Tenaya Canyon. And if you go beyond Mirror Lake, you'll find that there's a rock fall on the left-hand side of the trail. And if you kind of scramble up that rock fall and you get up pretty high like where I am, you can kind of get pretty close to where Muir had established that view. Again, I believe that view that he made is probably probably drawn from his mind's eye. So he was either a little bit higher than I was, or he was just drawing it from his mind's eye. But this was one of those moments. I was by myself. I was actually with a friend, but he didn't want to come up here. So I hung out here by myself for probably an hour. And I just sat there, and the weather was spectacular. The clouds were moving in and out. And this is definitely one of those moments where I just kind of sat there and I said, thank you, John Muir, for taking me to this place. I would have never gone here if it hadn't have been for John Muir. And this was just really a wonderful day in the mountains that day. Okay, John Muir made a lot of sketches in this is an actual journal, not a notebook, and you can see that he's just sketching it. And he writes this: when I had reached an elevation above Sunnyside, the tips of the mountains of the Merced Group, now called the Clark Range, began to rise above the curve between South Dome and Mount Starr King. These were adorned as I had never seen them before. From the thin wave-like summit of Mount Clark and the sharp pyramid point of Gray Mountain, there streamed a splendid white banner of splendid dimensions. These banners were at first bent upward and then continued with sublime motion horizontally for a length of at least 3,000 feet. Seen against the blue sky, the effect was indescribably grand, and he called these, you can see them here, he called these snow banners. They're little banners that came off the tops of the mountain. And here you go. If you want to locate this one, for those of you that are super familiar with the Upper Yosemite Falls Trail, once you get past Columbia Rock and you get into the switchbacks, a little ways up the switchbacks, there's a gigantic boulder that you actually make a switchback around the boulder. And I'm pretty sure that John Muir was standing really close to that spot when he made this initial drawing. Now, if you actually go and read John Muir's Snow Banners article that he wrote for Harper's Magazine in 1877, he mentions Indian Canyon. So it's quite possible that he was in someplace else, but I feel pretty good about this site. So as you can see here, this is what it looks like today. There's Muir's drawing, but Muir really was captivated by this, and he made a number of drawings. He made this drawing here. This is a separate drawing. Then there's this one here where you can see the snow banners. You can see that the perspective is a little bit different on these three here. And then this one is a completely different perspective. This is his draft article that he submitted to Harper's Weekly or Harper's Magazine in 1877. And then lastly, this is what it actually ended up looking like in Harper's, and this was actually done by their engraver. I've looked many times, I cannot read the engraver's name, but you can see that he really emphasized the bannerishness of these wonderful images. Okay, some of you may have figured this one out already. We've got some telltale signs. I stared at this one for a while, but this one, it's really, I want to tell some other stories about this particular day because this was a remarkable day. I did do some pre-searching with Google Earth with VR to try to figure out where this was, but it really reminded me of the story of Stikine. John Muir, you all are familiar with the story of Stikine. The dog, Stikine, wanted to come with him out onto a glacier, and Muir said, hey, look, stay in camp, stay in camp. Finally, the dog looked up to Muir and he said, where thou goest, I go, or something like that. And Muir wrote, so at last I told him to come on if he must, and I gave him a piece of bread I had in my pocket. And then we struggled on together, and thus began the most memorable of all my wild days. This particular day up into Illilouette Canyon was my most memorable of all my wild days. I had such a blast this day. I got to go up there with Bob Hare. And in order to get up Illilouette Canyon, you get to do kind of the planes, trains, and automobile version. We rode our bikes to the top where the water tank is, where you're not allowed to ride your bikes. So you didn't hear that from me. But anyway, we stashed our bikes deep into the woods. And then we started going up. There's kind of a trail there for a little while. And then you pretty much just are scrambling. And we're walking around on this slope. I wonder if this is a spot. I wonder if there's a spot. We got exhausted. So we stopped at this rock here where Bob's sitting. And we stopped there to take a break. And I pulled out my cheese sticks and I'm kind of chomping around. And I turn around and I look out and it's like, oh my gosh, that is the spot. And as you can see, we celebrate gloriously at finding this spot that we were so excited that we've been looking for. But yeah, this is it. It's grown in quite a bit. Here it is today and what it looks like in the drawing. Really easy to spot. There's Washington Column, Royal Arches, and North Dome all set up right there. And you can see that a lot of trees are now in the way. But this was definitely one of those spine-tingling moments from my research into this. This one is not in the book. Something I forgot to mention. You're going to see some drawings here that are not in the book. You're also going to see some drawings that are in the book. And then, yeah, anyway. So you get a couple of bonuses tonight. And the really great thing about this particular day is Muir made, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 drawings from up in Illilouette Canyon there, including this absolutely beautiful view looking back at Half Dome. You're probably looking at me saying, wait a minute, Mike, that's not exactly where Muir stood when he made that. Well, you're right. It's pretty clear that he didn't because Muir's a lot closer to the panorama cliff right here. And I have a lot more air there. But you can kind of see why I couldn't move over much further because Illilouette Creek was absolutely roaring that day. And there was no way I was going to get across the creek to get this exact spot. But I feel that I'm pretty close to it. And that was just an absolutely glorious day. I just love the way that Half Dome looms over this whole area, this whole canyon, the whole time that you're hiking up in there. So that was really a wonderful day and certainly one of the most adventurous of my time. You're probably picking this one out pretty quickly. This one is in the book. I'm going to read a quick thing. I call these, Muir has a series of drawings that I call a glacier eye view of Tenaya Canyon. And Muir wrote, I started up the canyon of Tenaya caring little about the quantity of bread I carried, for I thought a fast, a storm, and a difficult canyon were just the medicine I needed. He'd been in the San Francisco Bay Area for a while. This canyon is accessible only to mountaineers. Big tip there. This canyon is only accessible to mountaineers. I scrambled around the Tenaya Fall and was ascending a precipitous and smooth rock front when suddenly I fell for the first time since I touched foot to Sierra Rock. I became insensible, and when consciousness returned, I was trembling, but not injured. There, said I, addressing my feet, that is what you get with intercourse with stupid town stairs and dead pavements. I was now awake, and I felt confident that the last of the town fog had been shaken from both head and feet, and he could continue on up the canyon. Okay, so this is deep in Tenaya Canyon. There's no way that with a clear conscience, that I could send anybody up there. I haven't even been up here yet. I wouldn't consider myself a mountaineer either, but someday I hope to get up there. But this is kind of cool. You've got Half Dome there, quite clearly you've got Sentinel Dome. And then right there is Watkins Pinnacles. Of course, Mount Watkins is right there too. For this one, I got out Google Earth with VR again. And what I did is I found the spot and then I backed up until it hit a trail. And I came pretty close. There's Half Dome, there's Sentinel Dome, and there is Watkins, Mount Watkins and Watkins Pinnacle down there. What I did is I backed up and I hit a trail. And where this happens to be is if you go out, if you take the trail to Clouds Rest from Tenaya Lake, you'll come across the Sunrise Lake turnoff. Instead of turning off for Sunrise Lake and making a left, go right and go out onto that little point there. It's only about a couple of 100 feet out to that point, and you get this amazing view of Tenaya Canyon. Again, a really special day in my travels. So this one, yeah, it's not the exact same place that John Muir was, but it certainly was just as rewarding as if I'd been where John Muir was. Okay, this is kind of a little tip of the hat to the wonders that the editors at the Yosemite Conservancy did. The drawing in the upper left there is the original drawing that John Muir made, and this is what appears in the book. It's much cleaner and much easier to see. And this is what John Muir had to say about this drawing, or about this area. This valley is about 3/4 miles wide and dry and ferny at the head with azaleas, alders, and conifers along the river. In the middle, the densest grove of alder and young cedar are so close that it's difficult to get through. Big Rock Creek is about twice the size of Yosemite Creek, and it divides this big delta into two main branches. Had a feast of raspberry on its banks where a bear had been feasting before me. Very abundant. Vegetation as in Yosemite. Well, you've probably already figured it out. If it's just like Yosemite, it's got to be Hetch Hetchy. As you can tell, it looks a little different today than it did in John Muir's time, but this was another really mind-blowing thing. My colleagues there and I are standing on this huge rock right before Wapama Falls. And when you get on that rock and you look out there, it's like, I'm pretty sure this is where Muir stood when he made this drawing, because it is just so remarkably bold. It's a great place to sit. I am so thankful that Muir decided to not make this drawing from below water level, and that he was actually above water level when he made this drawing of Hetch Hetchy. Okay, I'm not that close to the end. I apologize. If you need to leave, I will not be hurt. But I've got a few more drawings that I want to share with you, but I'll go through them a little bit quicker than I intended. This is a famous drawing of Samoset that Muir made. Muir made a lot of pictures of trees because he's a botanist. This one was a little bit hard to find at first until I finally got in touch with the Yosemite National Park's archives and found a 1931 map of the Mariposa Grove where they had Samoset marked. And so I went up there, and you can see it's not too far from what they used to call the museum. It's now called the Yosemite Grove Cabin, or Mariposa Grove Cabin. And there I found the spot. Okay, trust me on this one. You're probably thinking, yeah, right, Mike, that just looks like a bunch of trees. You could have been standing anywhere. Well, guess what? If you really get in close on that drawing and you really get in close on that tree, sure enough, there's Samoset, the great tree, because you've got this nifty little burn mark in there. And sure enough, that little burn mark is still there today. As you know, Muir first saw the giant sequoia groves when he entered Mariposa Grove in 1868. He revisited this site in 1871 with Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Emerson named this tree Samoset after the first American Indian that the Pilgrims came into contact with in 1620. But Muir was not a big fan of ruining these trees with names. He didn't really like naming the trees, or as he said, worse, scarring them with black glaring names carved on marble tablets and countersunk in the brown bark, producing a shabby tombstone appearance. Interestingly enough, this very much matches the park's feelings about this today, and the park is very vigilant about not naming trees in these groves. Okay, top of North Dome. It's interesting, Muir talks about making a lot of drawings from the top of North Dome, and we only have, in our collections that I've found so far, 2 drawings from the top of North Dome. Actually 3 if you count this darling little drawing that he made of a grasshopper, and what a grasshopper did when it was on the top of North Dome. But anyway, I actually talk about, in this particular passage in the book, I talk about other theories about how Yosemite was formed, and there's a passage in there from Josiah Whitney, who felt that Yosemite was caused by a cataclysmic of falling of the land, and that maybe if you're sitting on North Dome, you might see it that way, but Muir definitely saw it differently. And Muir was, of course, was the one who finally convinced enough people that Yosemite was more likely created by glaciers, that it was cut by glaciers. And speaking of glaciers, here's a moutoned rock from the Big Tuolumne Meadows, and you probably figured this one out pretty quickly. Just to kind of give you an idea of what a moutoned rock is, it is a rock where the glacier had kind of gone across the top of it and plucked the rock off of one side, kind of giving it that look. The photograph that I have there is not Lambert Dome. It is some other domes that have the similar topography that would give you the moutoned rock. And mouton is, as you probably know, it's sheep. In French, mouton, so it's a roche montagnée is the geological term, I guess, describing this. And there's a number of different reasons why they think that they call it a sheep rock. What does it look like today? Well, you can see Mount Dana there in the background. John Muir was good enough to include a very schematic view of Mount Dana in his initial drawing in probably around 1873 when he made this one. And then here he draws this one a little bit later, probably around 1880 in preparation for the book, for a book. And then finally, this is what it looks like in Picturesque California that was published much later. And this was done by George Spiel, who engraved it in the book. If you notice the geography that we're taking, yes, we're getting near the end. I only have a couple more drawings for you, and then we'll get to some Q&A if you have any questions. And if you want, you can start loading some questions in the Q&A now if you have them. Okay, you've probably figured out what this is, but I'm going to read you one more passage. We are in the habit of calling all parts of God's world deserts that are not fitted for our uses. Irishmen call deserts countries not adapted to the growth of potatoes. So do Hindu countries not fitted for rice. Nature makes no more ado about the so-called desolation of a country than any fraction of one. Mono is now an icy sea, now a salt-hot lake, now desolate with fire, now with frost, now sunshine. Fertile lands are made into deserts and death valleys simply because some mister died in them. And as you can probably figure out, we're looking at Mono Lake there. This was kind of funny when I was doing my research. I pulled up, I was using a Mac machine, a PC, and it was using, and their screensaver was pretty much the exact same view that you'll get there above the Woe Nelly Deli for anybody that goes out there. This one is not in the book. So if you want to track this one yourself, you just go up to that vista point above the Woe Nelly Deli and you'll see this area. This is kind of cool for a couple of reasons. One, you're on top of a very, very old moraine that came down through the canyons, Lee Vining Canyon. And also, it's one of the terraces of the historic Lake Russell that's there too. So this is kind of interesting. Another interesting thing about this, of course, the water level is a lot different than when it was in Muir's time. And we know that LA took water, that diverted water from Mono Lake, and there's been some things in place to kind of even out the score on that. But it really strikes me that both sides of Yosemite has water being taken from it. We have Hetch Hetchy on the west side and Mono Lake on the right. I like this drawing a lot. It really kind of shows off Muir's attention to botany, although he really is excited about drawing the Sierra. This is also botany. And I'm going to read one more quick passage. And he says, so gloriously colored and so radiant, the Sierra seemed not clothed with light, but wholly composed of it, like the wall of some celestial city. Then it seemed to me that it should be called not Nevada or Snowy Range, but the Range of Light. And I find that this drawing does a wonderful job of kind of giving that idea of the range of light. I had to stretch the drawing to make it fit the reality of my camera, which is a little unfair, but that's what it looks like. This one's actually pretty easy to find. You can actually stand at the exact same spot with your car. This is the Rush Creek Road that comes out of the main highway there just south of Lee Vining. And right before you get to Rush Creek, you can stand right there. As you can see, I'm practically standing in the car to rephotograph this very point. So this is a really easy one to get and a lot of fun. Winding down here, there were some places that I could not find. I could not find this one of John Muir sitting on this rock. There's some information on the back of the photograph that said John Muir is at the base of Bridal Fall. I tromped around those rocks for an entire day. Well, probably not in a day, but probably a good 2 or 3 hours, just looking at every single rock, trying to find one flat that he would be sitting on it. But it's either not there or I'm in the wrong place. You can see me tromping around in the upper picture, but I also wanted to show off. This is one of those days that the traffic was horrible and I'd used my bike and I rode from Bridal Fall back to Curry Village along the road, right through these cars here that were moving. Well, actually they weren't moving, so it was safe, but it was just amazing to do that. So I'm kind of showing off there. Lots of other amazing drawings. This one is actually well below Yosemite on the Merced River. I love this drawing. If you look really carefully there's a little campfire and something else going on. What are these two people doing on the beach? I do not know. And what are these? Whoops. And then also at the top of, he made some drawings from the top of Mount Hoffman, which I have unsuccessfully twice, or just once unsuccessfully attained the peak. So I too want to go up to the top of Mount Hoffman someday and reproduce those. So yeah, this is Eagle Peak. Not to be confused with Eagle Point or Eagle Rock, which actually have a lot to do with Muir's drawings. I won't get into that right now. And there's actually another eagle in the valley someplace that I can't find. But yeah, so I hope you grab a copy of the book. There's the URL if you want to buy it. But you know, I really hope that tonight that that I was able to share some of Muir's beautiful drawings with you. I hope you too can kind of have that sense of purpose when you use the book and go out there and use it as a guidebook. It's not a sit down and read book, but you can do it with all sorts of virtual. You can go into Google Earth. In fact, our website, if you find the drawings on our website, you can actually use a map to find out exactly where they are. Remember to take a moment when you get to these spots like I did, take your shoes off. And then lastly, thank Muir when you go to these places too. And of course, I thank a bunch of people for giving me the opportunity. Of course, the Sierra Club was a huge help, not only in this project, but making this possible. So thank you, Harold and the Sierra Club. I also want to thank Nicole Geiger, who is my editor with the Yosemite Conservancy, to make this book possible. And then I have to thank my employers, University of Pacific, because they've done some wonderful things. In fact, a shout out to the former president of the University of Pacific, Pamela Ibeck, who's watching with us today. Thank you for your support over the years. And of course, most importantly, also associated with Ibeck is the Muir family themselves. I thank the Muir family the most. If it hadn't have been for you, this project never would have happened. If you hadn't had the peace of mind to feel that his papers need to be someplace where they can be shared. So thank you so much. And I'll start addressing questions here. Harold, do you want to jump in before I start answering questions?
Just wanted to thank you for your presentation. That was very good, Mike. And I see we do have some Q&A coming in. So if you have a question, I'll go ahead and type it into the Q&A. If you have a physical limitation or something that maybe needs more explanation that you can type, there is a function where you can raise your hand and then I can recognize you and you could verbally, I can allow you to verbally ask your question. But I have a long list of names here and it may take a minute to find you, but I'll do my best. So meanwhile, we'll work off the Q&As. Feel free to add on those. Thanks. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Thank you. Just another thing, for those of you that might be jealous of what an amazing job I had, these are my offices while I was writing this book. Obviously, I have an office too. I'm kind of sitting, it's just right behind me, but I like to call these my offices. Some of you probably recognize that this is camp, 88 and 89. There we are setting up. Here I am I actually spent a little bit of time at the housekeeping down here in the lower right. This is my cabin in the Sierra that's not too far from the Calaveras Grove. This is when I actually first discovered that John Muir had stood right there when he made that drawing of Mona Lake. And this is me taking some colleagues to Yosemite last year. So first questions first, did Muir ever go out together with a photographer and write about the location and photograph? Kind of a great, fun question there. Muir and photography. So Muir says in 1903, he writes, he has never taken a photograph. Did he go with a photographer and write about the locations and photographs? Off the top of my head, I'm not really sure, but the way he used photography is he would ask people to send him photographs of things that he saw or that they had seen so he could illustrate or whatever that he needed to do. So here at the University of Pacific, in addition to the drawings, we do have a collection. I think it's about 3,000 photographs that we have. We've put all the photographs of John Muir online, which is about 250 photographs, but the rest of the photographs are not online. If you ever wanted to come see those, we can certainly set you up to do that. Well, right now it might be a little bit of a challenge, but there's that. Next question. Any information that there were more drawings or have been lost? Yes, I am sure there are additional drawings out there that are lost or have not been discovered. I do know that there are some other archives that have drawings that are not part of our collection. I think the Yosemite Museum has some drawings. I don't think they have a whole lot. I don't know for sure. Maybe somebody would know that better than I would. What else was I going to say? Yeah. Muir's stuff, we're really fortunate. He did keep a lot of things, and we're very fortunate that a lot of material actually made it into an archives. But there's a lot of stuff still floating around out there. Family members have it and things like that. And you know, obviously we would love to have the material. The great thing about having it here at Pacific is that everybody will always know where it is and it can be shared with the general public. Lee Turkelson asks, do I have future plans for another book looking for sketches outside of Yosemite? I mentioned Bob Hare earlier. He has done some amazing work. He has geolocated, oh gosh, I would probably say, well, dozens of drawings that Muir did up Merced and down the Tuolumne and other places in the high country. We're hoping someday maybe to put together a book covering those areas as well. And yes, I would love to follow this up with another book someday because sharing Muir's drawings are really what I'm very focused on right now. Okay, 1871, Muir discovered an active alpine glacier below Merced Peak. Any luck figuring out where it is? Also, the hanging nest, was this built as is or added on for him? The hang nest, I do not know the answer to that question off the top of my head. And this is one of the great things about being an archivist and a librarian is I think we can find the answer someplace in the collection. And again, you can go online and look for that. I do not know. If you want to send me, you can find me pretty easily if you search for John Muir Papers. You can find me on the internet and send me an email and I can take a little closer look because I'd actually like to know that too. I've heard a number of stories and I'm not quite sure what's really true there. A good question about active glaciers. I think the two big contributions that John Muir made to geology is one is the glacial origins of Yosemite itself, but more importantly, or as importantly, people like Josiah Whitney and Clarence King and stuff also believed that the high country had been created by glaciers, all that upper area, like the active glaciers that you're talking about. But the big difference there is Muir felt that there were still live glaciers in Yosemite when he visited, not in Yosemite Valley, but in the high country in the 1869, 70s, early 70s. So that was his other big contribution. I'm pretty sure the glaciers that we're talking about are McClure and spacing the other one's name right now, the two glaciers. I'm sure someone will know what they are. But that's a really fascinating story. In 1872, he goes up there and he actually plants stakes in a straight line across the glacier. And then he goes back a little bit later and finds out that that straight line is now a curved line, thus showing that the glacier or that snowfield is moving. Clarence King and others said, well, it's just a snowfield. Muir said, well, if it's moving, then it's a glacier. And they said, okay. But once they saw that happen, that's what it is. But it's McClure and why am I spacing the other one? I'm sure somebody knows. Glad you could join us, Teresa. Let's see. Oh, Jacqueline, great question. What's the longest hike, miles or hours, that you had in order to get to one of these spots? And thanks, and thank you so much for coming out. Yes, Elaine, that's Mount Lyell, by the way. Lyell and McClure are those two early glaciers that Muir found. Yeah, for this book, the farthest one in the book, and probably the hardest hike, is the one where you go up there to where Sunrise Lake peels off of Clouds Rest. And that is, I think, I'd have to look at the book again. I think it's a 2.5 mile hike up there. There are probably some other ones. That was the hardest one that I did. There are a lot of them that were actually pretty challenging. So I think that would be the hardest. Oh, right. Going up Illilouette Canyon probably took the longest because that's just straight up. There's no trail or anything like that. So that isn't in the book, but those ones were very, very difficult and were very exciting to try to do. So that's a good question. One of the things that we really tried to pay attention to while we were putting the book together is we chose to have sites that were easily accessible. And if you get a chance to visit Yosemite this year, if you go to the valley, you can actually bang out, I think, 8 sites almost without getting out of your car. I mean, that's how easy they are. It quickly gets into more challenging ones, but and then there's some very challenging ones that I haven't gone yet. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. I think that's gonna be a real challenge if we do another book, especially if we focus on Yosemite, is how far do people want to hike to go to these places? Harold, did we get any questions from folks that wanted to speak live?
I'm not seeing anybody raising a hand, so
Okay.
all I see is just the questions that you've done on the Q&A, and I don't see any additional ones, so I'll just invite anyone. If you have any last-minute questions for Mike, go ahead, and otherwise we'll wrap it up.
And thank you all so much. This is a great opportunity to talk about Muir and Yosemite, and I hope you all soon get an opportunity to go up to Yosemite and see the glories that Muir did in the ways that he saw them.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate very much, Mike. This great presentation. We had a good turnout tonight. It's good, wonderful that we can substitute for not being up there in person. So thanks so much. So I'm going to sign us all off and say goodbye, and check the website. You should get an email after this giving the location for future programs. We have several more programs scheduled. I think we're going to have 6 in all coming up. Pretty much the same time, same place, a different address on the Zoom, but Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Check the website and you can see what the upcoming programs are. There are going to be some really good ones. So
Harold, sorry to interrupt, Harold. We did get one more question in about drawings with people in them, and they are few and far between, and it's actually kind of a funny story. If you look at Muir's drawings, for the most part, he does impeccable drawings of plants. He does very good drawings of animals, but people, he just cannot draw. He has a really tough time drawing people. So you'll see that they kind of look like stick figures generally, but yeah, there are quite a few drawings, and you can find them throughout the collections of that. So again, sorry, Harold, for letting me interrupt. And I would say normally let's head back to the camp and sit by the campfire and have a beer, but maybe I'll just go home and drink a beer.
Sounds like a good idea. Good night, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.